Hello, welcome to Rogue Startups. I'm your host, Craig Hewitt. Here, each episode, I'm going to be sharing a nugget and a piece of wisdom that I'm learning from growing my business, Castos, from 7 to 8 figures and hopefully beyond. Business is tough. There's no easy button to push to take all the right answers and the shortcut to guaranteed success. But I truly believe that with the collective wisdom we have from this tech community, we really can do better and easier than we could alone. I'm basing a lot of this on an amazing amount of help and feedback I've gotten from other podcasts and other founders and other YouTube channels. And this is my attempt to give back a little bit to the community to help you grow your business more sanely, to a higher level, more profitably, to where you're having a better experience in this journey. I sincerely hope you like the new format here. If you want to connect with me, head over to Twitter. I'm at @TheCraigHewitt. And for show notes for this and every episode, roguestartups.com. Let me know what you think. When I think about I want to talk to someone who's a really good practical marketing mind. Ruben, you're like the first person I want to talk to because there's so much bullshit out there about hustle culture and do this and optimize this. And I think it's really dangerous actually for a lot of us as what are solo founders and small teams. And I always find our conversations the most enlightening about the 80-20 of marketing. And so very selfishly, I'm thrilled to get a chance to chat today, and I know it'll be really valuable for everyone else. So Ruben Gamez, for folks who don't know you, previously, currently still founder of Bidsketch and founder of SignWell, e-signatures for professionals, right?
Yep, that's right. Always good to talk to you as well. Been in the SaaS game for a while. Bidsketch, when was that? Almost 15 years ago, which is crazy in SaaS and software. And SignWell now about 4 years.
Okay. Gotcha. Is Bidsketch still going or?
Yeah, it's still going. That is, backstory is real quick. SignWell was supposed to be version 2 of Bidsketch. Launched that, and there were eventually as separate brands, and then they were supposed to be merged. At some point, the market pulled us in a direction to where it just became clear, okay, this is a separate company. We're going in a different direction, and now I have two. But really, most of the team's focus is on SignWell right now.
Yeah, gotcha. What does the team look like right now?
Small core team with some contractors and small core team, some full-time people, and then contractors and a couple of agencies for extra stuff. So core team is 3 on the development side, DevOps person as well, security, SOC 2 compliance. We're moving into bigger deals with mid-market really is what it truly is, and then a little bit touching on enterprise as well. But we do a ton of self-serve, and that's where it mostly started, and we're still doing that. So we're serving both of them, which is not advisable to do early on, at least, right?
Yeah.
Don't do both.
Let's talk about that, because we are in a similar boat. So we have 2 different versions of that. One, we have our very self-serve hosting product, and then we have our Castos production service, which is sales calls and selling thousands of dollars a month. But even within hosting, we closed actually this month a couple of $1,000 a month customers.
Nice.
Yeah, really great. We just got to find more of those. And that's the thing is we raised some money, hired a sales team. Let's go after the enterprise. And we found it really, 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 really hard to proactively go find those bigger deals to where we couldn't. And we failed, I think, arguably. Does that stuff all come inbound for you, or what is that serving those 2 groups at the same time look like?
So because so if you get enough volume inbound, you'll kind of get some of the enterprise. Depending on your market and category, you might get more of that than in other categories. But for us, we get some of that, but not enough for it to just be our only thing. So part of the effort is, just get a ton of volume and get a ton of traffic, get a ton of leads, a ton of everything, and build brand that way. And you will get, enterprise deals that way. But then there's another part which I'm starting to work on, which is we have to go out and get those. And that's a very different thing, and it looks completely different than, everything's very different about that.
Yeah, we couldn't make it work. Thus far we've not been able to make it work. I'm not giving up hope, but just like in the kind of previous incantation of our setup, like we couldn't grow fast enough.
You mean like going outbound for podcasts for people who are, how do you do that? Like, because how do you know if the same question maybe for you is like, how do you find people who have a problem with digital signatures today? And like, maybe a little different because like they have the rest of their business that's kind of going on. But for us, it was like our outbound was more specific than that. Even was like, how do we reach companies who want to start internal company podcasts and need a dedicated mobile app and need, SSO and need all these things. So we were selling like a need and a solution at the same time, which is, I think, the challenge, right? Yeah, inbound is great because, think about like the stages of awareness of a customer, right? They're already problem aware. They may even be solution aware and just deciding on you as the solution. That's pretty easy. And we close those. But like you're talking about like being proactive about reaching out to the market and saying like, hey, have you thought about starting a podcast? Then you're asking someone, okay, internal comms or learning and development or marketing person, I want to add something to your plate that's going to take budget and your time and resources, and you got to report it up to the C-suite, and you got to go down to get it adopted by the team. Right.
It's just a lot of it's a lot of stakeholders, and I think that's why we've suffered because like the rest of like yours, like everything is inbound for us. Everything. Right. We've done almost no outbound.
Yeah, that's really tough, especially with I personally wouldn't do it. Like I wouldn't approach it that way. Having the both things. It's about finding people who are. You don't want to have to convince somebody to like, oh, you're not doing e-signatures, do e-signatures, or maybe they're even for us. Maybe there's we have companies that are larger that have like largely paper-driven processes, or through email and all that stuff, and that's an easier sell because they're already doing the thing. It's just kind of changing how they're doing it and making it more efficient, right? Like if you're talking about podcasting, if they're not, it's one thing to, maybe be doing the thing that you're trying to convince them to do with podcasting, which is like, it's a podcast for internal communication with all of their employees. If they're already kind of doing that thing, and they're struggling in some way, shape, or form, and you can kind of talk to and find out like what that looks like, what that feels like, what these companies are like, who they are, what like things that you can sort of target based off of like their profile in some way, shape, or form, then you can start to reach those and pitch it sort of in that way. You're already doing this thing. This is like way more efficient, and like that's how I would probably think about it. But if that's not happening, then I wouldn't even like try that.
Yeah. And I think that like that common thread that you're talking about was like, and still is a challenge for us. And I think, I had a conversation with our mutual friend, Brian Castle, yesterday about this is like, how do we go put gasoline on this fire and just get more of what's already coming to us? But how do we do that in like a targeted specific way? It sounds like you're saying the way you like to approach that is find the people that have the problem already and are solving it in a bad way, or not your way, or maybe not solving it at all
with an alternative, with an alternative, or doing it slightly different, right? Instead of like convincing them to, because you're right. That is tough. That's super hard. Yeah. Like I'm sure some, master copywriters and whatever, like back in the day can pull it off, but I want to take the easier route.
Yeah. And so like practically, what does that look like? I mean, we both talk a lot about SEO and content marketing. Like that's a big one. I know you've done a lot of like work with templates as like a form of content marketing and SEO. Like y'all rank for, different templates and business forms that people would want to use. Is that still like a big strategy And maybe let's take a step back. I don't want to ask you for your secret sauce, but we always try to like abstract the lessons that we're learning that apply to a lot of people. So just like generally, if a person's like, I want to insert my brand name in the problem discussion for folks, like how could we think about it?
Yeah. So you're talking about like building a brand is what you're asking about, kind of.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like to me, I'm more specifically saying like, how do you just get in front of a customer when they're having this problem so that you could be their choice?
You have to talk to enough customers and sell enough customers to know what that looks like to be able to do that. Otherwise you're just guessing, and it's really, 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 really hard. Whether it's sales or whether it's marketing, it's the same sort of thing, right? And like, I think we should separate like early stage, very early, like 0 to 1, right? Like that whole, like you're not even at 10,000 MRR or whatever, and you're just grinding, right? Like you don't even have, let's say, even 10 customers, and you're just trying to get in, like what marketing looks like then versus, you already have, hundreds of customers, maybe thousands of customers, and you're like, okay, how do I, get into tens of thousands, or maybe not, maybe like just the next 1,000 that's going to 2x, 3x, 5x our revenue because we can charge them so much more, right?
Yeah.
Those are very different. So
I think just for the folks that listen to this show, the second is probably more applicable. So thousands of MRR a month to, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. I think first part, once you have some traction, especially like later on, once you have a good amount of revenue, it's like if you've already taken care of the low hanging fruit, you've already, like the obvious, like do more of what's working, right? Something's working, do more of what's working. You've done that. Like it's super, I won't say easy, right? You still have to execute, but it's a lot more straightforward, right? When there's room there and it's like, okay, something's worked and we just need to, with this, doing this 10 times more effectively or more or whatever look like, and you go after that. Once it starts to get a little bit hard and you're like, okay, let me look at new channels, or this is like, there's not much more room left in what we're doing, which can, depending on how big your market is, happen kind of early on. Then it's like, I think it's important to look at objectively as objectively as you can, like how much more room is there in this market for the thing that we're selling and the way that we're selling it, So if you're like, oh, well, we could probably like, and some of it you can look at competitors and things like that, and like, how big are they? Are they really that much bigger? If they're like 2, 3x, 5x bigger, like, okay, that's not much more. If they're 100, 1,000 times bigger, then you have a lot of room, right? So my thinking is, if it's kind of tight and you're like, oh, if we're doing pretty good, and if the best we could ever do, almost, it looks like right now, at least right now, in the way the market, our category looks like, is like 3x, 4x, 5x even. It's like, that's kind of small. That's not a lot of room to maneuver and get. I'd start to look at, do it. So Intercom has chosen to, give an example, Intercom has chosen to do it by adding more like products to the edges of their products, right? Like around the use cases. So that's one way. ProfitWell took a very interesting approach there in SaaS. The category is kind of small. It's not that big for SaaS. So if you look at that category, ChartMogul, what they did is they just went premium. And, the profile of a lot of their customers just looks very different than, let's say, Barometrics, which is like lower end. They did increase their prices, but they're going more like truly mid-market and enterprise. And then even ChartMogul's now added a new product, CRM, to their, right? This is the game, and this is how it kind of works, right? And then ProfitWell really took a different approach, which is like, we're just going to give away the thing for free. We don't even think it's that big of enough of a category. And then they upsell like crazy, and like for individual, like, the retained product, and they price it very differently, a lot higher.
And they upsell an annual product. And Right.
Yeah. So for us, it's like, we have a lot of room, like on both ends. Like there's, you look at your category and you see how are people making money, and we did that, and we're like, okay, these are the, there's people making a lot of money on the just selling to self-serve. There's people on the there are companies who are just enterprise, and we're choosing now a path where we're adding enterprise and layering that on top, which is tricky and hard to do with self-serve.
Let me ask you guys two questions,
Sure.
And I'll give some context on where we are, and I'd love your impression of this.
Yeah.
So within podcast hosting space, we could 15 times our size, maybe, to be one of the bigger players and the biggest player in the space.
Pretty much the way that your product is, and going after mostly
along that path,
people.
right?
Okay,
just launched our Castos ads product. We need a lot more bells and whistles and stuff there, but not like the alternative, which is we take I think our existing customer base and expand the product to solve more of their problems. And I think there's two ways. You mentioned Intercom. That there's two ways you can do that. You can go vertical, right? And if you're a podcast hosting platform, you could do, okay, we're on Squadcast right now. We could build a Squadcast and we could build a Descript, and we solve the whole vertical kind of problem that a customer needs. Or you could say our customers are creators. Instead of just solving the podcasting problem, could we solve the blogging problem and the email problem that literally all of them have? Every one of our customers does more than just podcasting. They do all these other things too. So I think those are the two questions that you could ask yourself. If you go, there's not enough space in our niche, like you're saying, to grow to be the kind of size we want. That's one question. And then if that's the answer is you have to go and expand, do you expand vertically or horizontally?
How are the people who are making the most money in your space making money?
Yeah, super interesting. They all of the biggest players in our space make most of their money from ads.
So why wouldn't you consider that?
Yeah, so for the longest time, and still, I mean, no shit today, I know that like if we stuck ads on this podcast, we'd make $1.50 a month and just annoy the shit out of every listener. And so I just am like, it's not worth it to me. We're not a podcast that has 50 million, downloads a year. And so we just can't make appreciable money from this show. And
it's their own podcast?
Sorry?
It's their own podcast that they're putting ads on, or what? What's the model look like?
So there's definitely some of that.
Tech?
They're developing shows in-house and monetizing them directly. Okay. But more so they are selling the ad inventory to companies and then selling that inventory to podcasters and making money on impressions.
So like ad tech.
Ad tech. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So that's its own category. Interesting in podcasting.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's different. You can do that people are wanting this, right? Like the people who are paying for it. Like the way that I would look at it is like, how are the biggest players making the most money? And then evaluate that opportunity. And like, that would be a really viable way that I'd consider, like if it's working and it's working for more than one, you almost kind of like, for me, I almost kind of have to consider it. Right. Like otherwise, like who's making money? So you listed two other ways. Who's making money serving? And it's like, just because nobody's doing it doesn't mean you don't do it, right? So I just want to clarify
just more
that.
Risky, arguably.
Yeah, exactly. There's more risk there, right? So if you're going to go down that path, understand what the risk is, and then find a way to kind of hopefully quickly, like learn whether or not this is going to work, and whether or not others have tried it and it kind of didn't work for them, and if it didn't, why didn't it work for them, right?
Hey, it's Craig here. While I love podcasting and long form conversations like this, I also really love writing and really love email newsletters. I have a newsletter called Founder Insights, where every Saturday morning I share something I'm learning in my business that I think could help you grow your business sustainably and sanely and profitably as you go along this journey. If you're interested, head over to craighewitt.me/join to get Founder Insights, my newsletter, along with your cup of coffee this Saturday morning. See you there. I think with like kind of taking the thought from there, one thing I believe is, I'm not calling anyone out, and I'm calling myself out, but the thought of blaming the product on our lack of growth is weak, right? And I do it all the time, and I get after myself and I get after the team when they say, when X, then we will be able to do Y. And it's just so rarely the case that this feature will unlock this potential that will transform the company. Like, I think most likely
you guys are doing well. You've not found that, right?
No, I mean,
yeah, I've not found that in either of my companies as well. Like, it just, you're right. Like, it can happen, but it's not usually the case.
I think with the exception of probably what you're seeing with like talking about SOC 2 compliance and stuff, and with us, like the ability for podcasters to monetize their content. And we have two ways. One is with donations and Castos Commerce, and then with Castos ads, like dynamic ad insertion. It opens up a new part of the market. Right. You being SOC 2 compliant and HIPAA this and all this bullshit lets you sell that $1,000 a month customer. Whereas otherwise you're charging whatever I pay you, $19 a month or whatever. Right. That you have this world without some of these features. And I think that's the only way that I convince myself that, well, frankly, at this point, I mean, we're 6 years old, continuing to build product only should be to serve sales and marketing from this point.
Gotcha.
To unlock bigger opportunities in the market,
opportunities.
Or a bigger part of the market.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And that's true. Like, Rob with Drip, right? Like the workflows and going in that direction. Like, if you're adding features and all that stuff, maybe that helps retention, that helps onboard, like activation and things like that. But if you're talking about really, really, especially if you already have momentum and you're growing pretty good, like, it's hard to do that, like to get a meaningful growth off of just that. You're just going to, it builds on itself. It's not a bad thing, but features and things that will unlock new markets, but that's not enough either, right? So this is the other part of it. Like, that's just, it's almost like starting a new product in a way. Yeah. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. So yes, we have SOC 2 compliance and all that stuff. And yes, we some of the efforts from before are going to give us a little bit of revenue on that side, but I can't depend on that. So I have to think of it like almost like this is a new product, a new thing. Now learn how to approach these types of customers, because these customers look differently and they have to be sold in a different way and marketed to in a different way and all that. So it needs really like a completely different, almost completely different approach, usually. Yeah, in that way.
And that's super scary, right? Because you're at, pick a number, right? 20, 50, 100K a month. And now you're saying, okay, all of that shit that got us here, we're going to back burner and we're going to approach growth from a different perspective, like talking about risk. Like that's pretty scary to me. Say, hey, we're going to just not focus on growing this other thing that we did to get us here, but we're going to focus on this other completely different thing that we might not have a ton of experience with. Yeah.
So if it's not growing that fast anyway, there's not much of a risk there, right? For us, we're growing faster than ever on that side of things. So it is tricky to do this. And I'm
on the self-serve side, you mean?
Yeah, on the self-serve. So then approaching it from enterprise, I'm building kind of a separate team on top of it because, to do both, right? It's going to require that. And then I have to think about how to distribute my time and what that's going to look like. So it's not easy.
You mentioned brand a bit ago. Brand is the drum that I'm hammering as hard as I possibly can with our production service, but would love to just hear what are your thoughts on brand, at the point you're at?
So I feel like everyone talks, when they talk brand, they always talk about it in the same way. and they miss a lot of like how it actually works a lot of the time. So they talk about it in terms of like first thing, like thought leadership content, and what are you doing for thought leadership, blah, 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 and put yourself out there, blah, all this stuff. That's one way. It's not easy, and I think you have to look at your strengths and think about like what gives you energy. I don't think people think about that enough, and what you're good at
on a personal level. You mean?
Yes, on a personal level, and the DNA from your team. The team a lot of times reflects the founder, and you have to think about that, right? So if you're trying to do things that just don't match up, yeah, you can grow and learn, and but how realistic is it? That's not a good phrase, like, because we're pretty as founders, we're pretty good at like learning new stuff, and if we really want to do it, we'll go through the pain of doing it, and we'll get there. So I think that's fine. But are there better paths for you that can be considered in a way to where, like, if you just open up the thinking for brand as multiple ways of doing it instead of just like this is how it's done, then I think that's a little bit more helpful. So a couple of ways that I'm considering, because with Bidsketch I approach brand a little bit more like the thought leadership sort of approach, and that was a lot of work, and it felt like grinding, and it took a lot of energy from me. And not to say that you don't do any of that. It's just like where's your focus, right? Like when you have a limited amount of money and time and people, like you have to focus. Even if you're VC funded, it pays to focus.
Yep.
So part of it for me is like the more, and I think this is massively overlooked. It's not easy though, but it's just true. The more customers you get, the more volume you get of something, you build a brand in the process. That's just what happens a lot of times. And a lot of companies who build the big brand, they did it because like the brand didn't exist first, and that's why everybody started jumping on there. Like they started to get traction and momentum in these pockets that led them to get more customers, and then a brand was built, right? So that's one way. And so that's leading me to say, well, we don't want to completely abandon the lower end self-serve part, because that brings us a lot of value through just, that sort of brand name that we're building there, in that way. And the more people use our product, the more get exposed to, the documents that are being sent for signatures and stuff like that. So that's one thing. The other thing that I was just thinking of, and I was having this conversation with somebody who's very early stage. They haven't released their product yet, but they had a really good strategy that just reminds me of back in the day, how some people, like bloggers. I don't know if you've heard of Danny Inney.
No, I don't know the name.
Okay, so he's like back in the day, like Derek Halpern, Danny Inney, and like several of these like internet marketing sort of bloggers, right? So he got popular really quickly, and he was they started calling him the Freddy Krueger of blogging back in the day. And they called him that because they said like Freddy Krueger, he just appeared. He was everywhere. Wherever you looked, there he was, right?
Okay.
So then he had this course, which I bought back in the day, and it was about guest posting, and that's how his approach and how he did it. But it was actually really smart. The way that he detailed out his approach was that he picked his sort of like niche, it wasn't that he was in a niche and he niched down. It's just like for marketing, right? Like I can have a very horizontal product. We serve all sorts of small businesses, but I can say education's really big for us, or agencies of this type are really big for us. Let's focus a lot of our marketing on that. And that's like a really good way to go a lot of times when you're horizontal. It's just hard to just say anybody who has signature needs. So in a similar way, he said he was doing guest posting, and I don't remember, like something about internet marketing, and like for let's say people who were in the coaching space or something, which is he does that a lot nowadays. So what he did was like map out all the coaching blogs, and then he had somebody go through and collect a lot of the comments and put those on a spreadsheet, and then sort of just say like, what are the blogs that have the same comment, like the same people commenting on them? And so you map out this network and you say, okay, like these 3 blogs are really popular, like within, the segment here, a lot of these commenters here, and maybe these other 2 blogs there. So then he did repeated posts, guest posts on those. And as far as those people knew, like he was everywhere, right? Like every blog that they read, he was. So it's a similar sort of approach to where you, for your buyers or your people, like you identify in whatever it is. Let's say we're picking the education space, which we actually did some of this already, and identify where they hang out like communities or whatever, like how they hear about stuff, and then figure out how things get word of mouth in those pockets, in these networks. And you do that by just, of course, things like, if they're sharing tools or whatever, they'll talk about Google Docs, or, you ignore all the big brands. You look at the little brands, the stuff that kind of like nobody really knows about, but somehow becomes popular in these networks, and then see like what drives that. So for us, we found that in education, I'll give away a little bit of what we found here.
Secret sauce.
Yeah. We found that in education, there are a lot of things that are a pain in the ass with education, selling to education for us. Like budgets are low and a lot of stakeholders and all that stuff. But like once you get picked up, it can actually be pretty good after a while. It takes a while. But one of the things that we found was like, because they have such a hard time getting approval for things, and budgets aren't where they should be, free tools and heavily discounted things, or things that are special for education, tend to like get word of mouth. Like, hey, this thing is sort of, there's this deal here, or hey, you can use this for free or whatever. So we did that, and sure enough, we start hearing from other school districts and teachers and whatever. They start telling each other, and it starts picking up. So this is like the whole thing of like, it's not just focusing and picking a niche or whatever, and picking, that's like one part of it. It's like understanding it. Who do they follow? How does it work? Like how do things get picked up? How they become hot in that segment?
I think that's really interesting because, like, I think we've heard a version of that from a product perspective a lot, right? Is, I'm an email marketing provider and I want to serve e-commerce stores. I'll understand what they need, but you're kind of more saying, if you're an e-commerce, email marketing tool, you want to serve e-commerce, you want to understand how they buy and why and what's important to them from a buying perspective. And then it also kind of ties into, like, I know you and I've talked about the surround sound thing from HubSpot a little bit.
Yes,
just
exactly.
Like instead of Freddy Krueger, right? Just like be everywhere literally. And for everyone who doesn't know, like HubSpot's goal is to show up on the entire first page of Google. So like the search results, the ads, the featured snippet, the YouTube video,
without creating the content themselves. Right. Without having all those pages. Like they'll create some if they can, but then they'll also like, what are all these pages that are showing up? Let's get on there. Yeah. Let's get mentions on all
there. The blog listicles for best electronic signature stuff. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And I think that, we see that some, like I'll get on a sales call with folks and they're like, man, I see your shit everywhere. and that's so great, because then it's not like I got to convince them that Castos is right for them. It's just like, how much does it cost? And like, how do we work together? So yeah, I think
it makes everything easier. So it's that same thing. So you've already done it for some pockets, some sub networks of like, podcasting, and you, like you said, you get that, and people know your brand, But if you're like doing a new product or opening up a new market, you're basically doing that same thing all over again. And it's figuring out like, how do I do this there, and being deliberate about doing it there.
Yeah. And I definitely have never thought about brand from that perspective. I mean, I'm huge on brand, but it's more so generally across the board, not niching down to brand of a certain type of customer or like type of problem that they have. And I like that because, I mean, fucking brand is intimidating, you know? You talk about like, hey, let's make a brand, even with the assets and resources we have to be able to create a bunch of content, because I actually really like it. And that's a big part of my job these days. And a team to do it for free, essentially, to create a bunch of audio, video, social, imagery content. Like, don't have to find all those people. Like, we have the amazing people in-house. It's still really hard. And we've been going hard at it for months now, and we're starting to see an improvement. But hearing what you're saying, I bet we'd see a much bigger improvement if I said, okay, we're going to focus all of this brand energy on a customer, a type of customer with a problem, and dominate that. And then you can go like concentric circle out from there.
Exactly. FreshBooks did exactly that. A lot of companies do that. It works really well. It's hard. Like, there's that, and then not spreading because it's a form of spreading yourself too thin, right? Like going, like there are two ways of doing it. One is like just focusing on too many like non-related, even though it's all the same customer type, and you're like, oh, it's the same, but not really. Like if they don't talk to each other, then like you're just spreading yourself across, even if it's all like podcasters, or even if it's all, education. For us, it's not like just going after everyone in education. If they don't talk to each other, our efforts are spread out. It's that, and then also marketing tactics. Like if doing too many, the reality is for most businesses, like one thing works. It's like one thing works better than everything else. It's not like if you look at a lot of these, businesses that like, 10x the size of where we are, or where we are now, or even, smaller than we are. It's the same thing almost all the time, right? Like it's mostly one thing, and then maybe another thing that like is helping out as well.
And I will just say to everyone, and I'm saying it to myself as much as anything, is at some point that thing will stop working as well as it used to. And 100% we've been there for about the last year as growth slowed. It didn't stop, but it slowed. And that's rough when you have a burn rate, because it's just tough. And we got around that, unfortunately. But what we're finding is it's easy to say, let's go find another channel. Kind of like, let's just go build more product to solve our problems. And both of those are absolutely the wrong answer. And the right answer is, well, this thing got us to $100,000 a month or whatever it is. Okay, an aspect of that is tapped out. Let's figure out how to tweak that a little bit. Take a route like you're talking about. Okay, brand for a customer type in a channel. Oh, like we can do that, and we're doing that. And it just took me for fucking ever to figure that out, because the other options are easy, because essentially what you're doing is blaming product, or blaming the market, or blaming, the volume of SEO within your space, as opposed to just like doing the work to figure out how to get more customers roughly in the same way that you did, but with a slightly different twist. So.
Yeah. And I've been there too. Like you have to, the other thing, which I'm way more deliberate about and think about more nowadays, and have taken this approach with SignWell, is to think ahead of all of these, think ahead of where you are now. Like you don't want to get to a point of where like you've tapped it out. You want to have already by that point have moved on and been working on the next thing, right? Like whether that is, so now you're still doing this, but then the next thing is what? Like maybe the next thing is adding that new product offering or ad tech or whatever to like, and you kind of have that going, because that takes a while, and maybe going with slightly different, a couple of different people, like a consultant here or something, that's going to help out. So, so you're not like having everyone on your team just focus on all sorts of different things.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, you're a small company. We're a small company. Like to see that coming, pick the right bet. execute on it and get the feedback in a timely manner to where you know whether you did the right thing, whether it's execution or picking the bat or product or pricing or packaging or whatever. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. I mean, I'm making excuses for myself there a little bit, but yeah, I think that's really easy to say and probably hard to do, which is why it's so hard. Like it's there's a challenge to get to 1 million, right? And then to get to 10 million is like a whole different challenge because it's probably different than what got you to 1 in some small way. And that I think that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yep. Usually. And it's, but you know this because especially with what you've done with content marketing, you've done really well there. It takes a while. Like when you're doing new things, you have to say, you can't be like, oh, we're going to try this for, a month or a few weeks, and our budget's going to be like, we'll spend a few $100 or $1,000 or whatever. Like, by the time you've gotten to that scale and you're now looking at, okay, what's our next thing? And you've, done the work and research, right? Like these efforts, these things, because they take longer, you have to say, okay, well, this is going to be like a 6-month thing. Minimum a quarter, and it's going to require this much money and this. So it's a bigger bet. Because it is a bigger bet, it's probably best to spend more time up front with the research. Like when the bets are small and the experiments are smaller, sure, you do a little bit of upfront work, but because the feedback's so quick, it's like it doesn't make sense to spend that much time on that. But because there's more of a cost for these bigger bets of like a 6-month effort to go into, I'm going to talk to ex-employees of competitors that have done this. I'm going to maybe try to get one to consult for us and help us out there if they had success with it. I'm going to, do whatever I can to stack everything in our favor to make it successful, and still know that it's going to be work. It's going to take a lot of time and all that.
Yeah, that's why we get the big bucks, man, right? Because this is all hard, and there's no single right answer.
Right. Yeah. At least for me, like, I don't know, everything that I've done has just been work. I've made it work eventually. A lot of the things, some, not everything, but it just wasn't easy, and it wasn't like, oh yeah, we got lucky and this big thing just worked out for us and cool.
Right.
It's done.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Ruben, for folks who want to connect with you and follow along with what you're doing, where's the best place?
Twitter, I guess, Earthling Works, or it's not even called Twitter anymore. It's called like X or whatever. I'm not even sure.
X me. That sounds dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you are
Earthling Works, and then SignWell.com if you need to get your documents signed, or an API to automate electronic signatures.
Awesome. Ruben Gamez, thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.